So, I suppose coming back to that sort of advice piece. So as an entrepreneur, what do you think is, you've obviously said listening, which is obviously one of the key skill sets. What other sort of skill sets do you think is important if you were going to, so say you hadn't already been in the market, you haven't been in this market for 20 odd years and you haven't built all these businesses. If you're going to start off again, what would you have done differently?
Well, I suppose I've learned lots of things. I think learning from your mistakes, actually making mistakes is actually right. I think no one should be, if there was a few tips really, which is I would say, don't be, if you get it wrong, don't be deterred, right? I think you learn from your mistakes, right? There's no question. You must learn from your mistakes, right? But see those things and don't be deterred. We've done things that have worked. We've also done things that haven't worked, right? And learning and seeing why those things didn't work helps you. I think the fundamental thing, right, is persistence. Persistence is the absolute key. I think someone said, or people say, you make your own luck, right? People say, oh, they were lucky, right? They were lucky. They got here and they were lucky, right? It's not about that. It's you persistence, times 100 equals luck, right? Yeah, that's the formula, right? And that is the absolute key. When some people will say you get to a point and you give up, right? But if you see that you're on the right track, and sometimes you need someone. I think it's also easy to go down a blind alley and keep going, right? And it's like, that's what Joan would tell me, right? That's what Sarah would tell you, right? So sometimes, and it's a balance there, right? Because there's persistence and then there's knowing when to end, right? And actually, so, it's getting that right? But I think the key is persistence, right? If you really believe, and you've got to rationalize your thinking continuously.
Yeah.
The things that made you do it in the very beginning, when you're a year in or 2 years in, you've got to rethink about those things and think, is that still true? Am I doing this because I thought it 2 years ago, or do I still think it now? Right? That's the thing, right? But if you really can see that someone will buy into your particular vision of something, right? And you get enough along the journey to keep you believing that, right? Then you carry on, right? And you carry on until you get it right. But you have to live it, right? That is a scary thing, right? Yeah. Of this, right? Is that, as I said before, I don't have any hobbies, right? I don't have any, but I like doing what I do. You've got to like doing what you do for sure, because otherwise you will never get it, right? You will never get it if you don't like it. It's like life, isn't it? You should do the things you like, right? But it is that sort of constant focus. It's thinking about it all the time, and that's a problem, because you've got to be able to switch it off sometimes and make a work-life balance and all of those things, right? I had a young family who helped, right, and loved helping, right? But you still got to get the right balance between life and work. And actually, it's not something I've always done well, right? It's not something I've always done well. I'm better now, and I've been better for quite a long time. But it's the problem is you can live and breathe this stuff, right? And you sleep it, and you wake up in the morning, and you get in the shower, and you think, yeah, I know, right? Yeah, right. And it's those things, right? It can consume you, right? And to an extent, you might have to let it consume you for a bit to get to that place.
I agree. I think that's great advice. All of what you just said, I think is brilliant. And it resonates 100%. I've definitely in the past have had a very poor sort of work-life balance, really. And Phil knew, and Phil would often message about 2 o'clock in the morning, and because the phone's in the bed, you'd sort of reach out and have a look, and then you'd respond. So you get to the situation where 24/7 you are basically working and things, and that's not necessarily a great place to be. However, sometimes it's necessary. So I think it's important. But I love the bit when you said, you have to be persistent. You have to be, you've almost, you've got to have that focus of pushing. It's a little bit like when people I remember, even in business, but people would talk about saying that's not possible. And you always go, everything's possible. But everything comes back down to money or time. Which one of those things? Tell me how much it's going to cost, or tell me how much time it's going to take. It's all about priority. But yeah, I think everything is possible. It's about putting that focus in. Yeah, being persistent. I like that very much. Wow. So as the market is changing a lot, there's lots of things happening in the MIS market at the moment, and you've seen with the ESS as well how it's not. It's basically definitely not in the same place it was a few years ago anyway. So, do you think there is going to be a lot more change in the EdTech market? Because it seems like there's a lot more consolidation, like as an example, Community Brands bought GroupCall and Juniper bought up most of the trackers. And do you see a lot more change happening in this marketplace, or do you, and are there things that you would consider as priorities?
Well, changing the marketplace, I mean, as you said, right, everyone's, a lot of the obvious people were bought. Yeah, there was consolidation, which means that there's a space that's open, right? There's a whole area for new organizations to come in, right? People who are speedboats, right? Not tankers. Yeah, because the one thing you can say, well, I feel I can say about organizations like ESS, right, is that they would, and they would probably say it themselves, right? They're a super tanker. They've got so many customers, such a big product and everything to turn that takes some time, right? Whereas, the organizations, the small organizations which grew as accessories or almost to the MIS, right, in terms of the business of schools as opposed to learning, because I'm more on the business side of schools than learning. They will, like the CPOMs of this world, right, and those sorts of organizations that grew up from an idea and grew into something huge as something that was sold separately from the MIS. Those, they've all been bought, right? Group calls, right? So there's a space now for speedboats, right? And I think that there'll be them, and there's nothing really for some of these big organizations to buy anymore, right? So the innovation layer is, is bubbling away, right? And people like teamSOS and other companies are building innovative products, right, which service a need that's not been serviced before. And those will come through and grow and obtain customer or obtain clients. And there'll probably be a lull, right, while all these companies, they've got nothing to buy until the companies like mine and others are big enough, right, for them to be interested, right? And so I think that's what's going to happen, right? It seems logical anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All those big companies, in my opinion, private equity doesn't innovate, right? Obviously ESS is trying to innovate by delivering a brand new version of Sims, yeah, for sure. It'll take a big amount of time and an enormous amount of money and a lot of passion, and hopefully it'll come out something good in the end, right? That might take a while. Right? And there's lots of other people that did all of that in many respects some years ago, and so there's other people who compete with them, and the marketplace will decide what happens there. So I think that's certainly from a that's what I see happening in the marketplace. I think that sometimes, the consolidation of products you can see innovation in this, in some consolidation of products, where when you bring two products together that have some data that actually can mesh, right, to make something bigger, right, that's where you get some added value. I was speaking to someone yesterday, who I can't say who it was, right? Actually, because I haven't got their approval, right? But you know, where they literally had done that and generated a product that was better than anything else because of the augmentation of two different sources. And when you can do that, that's vision and integrate. That's innovation, right? A lot of the times, the big companies, and there are 5 or 6 of the obvious ones who I'm not going to name, right? But those guys, they bring all the company, they bring them all together, and it's a playbook, right? You know, you either buy someone who's got an enormous customer base, right, and then buy smaller products that you sell into that customer base, right, and make a big organization that's worth more than the money that's been put in, right? You know, that's I mean, that's the playbook, really. And so it's just selling other products into the you know, a client base that you've bought. So the innovations not tend to be there. So they leave a gap, really. They do leave a gap for speedboats.
I think that's a brilliant insight. You know, I fully agree. You know, when PEs buy just for growth or customer base, then I think you do lose a lot of that innovation. It is, let's face it, it is hard to tie two products together to create their single brand around them.
Sure.
So I think, you know, there's a lot of money that needs to be spent, and in lots of cases, PEs don't have the time, or you know, because they want to sell within the 3 to 5 years or whatever it might be. But when companies buy another product because it has a symbiotic sort of requirement, or delivers a solution which is symbiotic in the sense that the two bits together, you know, equal. You know, it's like 1 + 1 = 3 sort of type of thing, or 5. You know, that sort of type of solution, I think, is great. But you know, your point regarding this is now the time for entrepreneurs and innovators, because this is, you know, all that consolidation is sort of happening now around the edges. Now it's, you know, the space is now opened up for entrepreneurs and innovators. I think, what a great, exciting time. Do you know, I never really, even though, like you say, it's logical, but I didn't think about it. You know, and so I think, you know, that insight, I think, is well, should be magical to the ears of the people who have ideas and want to bring new solutions into the marketplace, for sure. So I think that's great.
I think there's always space. That one thing, sorry to interrupt you, there's always space, right? You don't have to be, you know, being the first isn't always the thing, right? Yep. That's for sure. Being the first isn't always the thing. But there is always space for a different take on a solution, or an innovation is still, you know, it's a wonderful thing, and there's still lots of opportunity. You know, we think that we came along with teamSOS with something different, right? That hadn't been done before. There's many other spaces.
Yeah, you're right. And innovation doesn't, you're right with the, you know, you don't have to be first, in the sense that innovation doesn't have to be disruptive. You know, you can have also innovation which is about just doing something better and having that stronger differentiator, because you'd learn maybe some of the mistakes that somebody else has brought in, you know, when they brought the product into marketplace. No, I agree. Or use latest technology. Maybe it's a case of going, there's better technology now, and we can, you know, we can do a better job than the existing products out there already. Yeah, absolutely.
It's exactly like we did with walkie-talkies. You know, the old technology and new technology. I mean, walkie-talkie is a thing. You know, it's just one. It's weird, actually, right? It's absolutely bizarre. You know, people still use this thing, but you know, in schools where you might get the taxi firm going past, right, and people, you know, and it interferes with the walkie-talkie, and then someone could actually say something about a student on a walkie-talkie, which in itself is not GDPR compliant, because anyone could hear it at the other end. And so then as soon as you go more than, you know, 50 feet apart, it doesn't work very well anymore, and it's noisy and whatever. And so putting that onto a, you know, effectively onto a mobile phone, right, and making walkie-talkie clear, work anywhere, and private, because actually what we do is we transcribe the audio into a voice message before you hear it, so you don't have to hear it, you just see the words on the screen. Yeah. And so that's like modern walkie-talkie, right? And all of a sudden I don't have to have a second piece of kit that I've got to charge, right? And so you can see that is completely an obvious way, right, of modernizing something that still was there for everybody, still uses walkie-talkies, right? You know, in schools, most schools use walkie-talkies. Yeah. And so that's where it makes sense. It completely makes sense to modernize something.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably not going to, you've got to be careful about going to, it's like Alexa. You wouldn't have Alexa in every classroom going, by the way, there's a fire, everybody. But, again, comes back to your point of technology. Sometimes for technology's sake is not the right thing. I suppose one of the questions actually I would like to ask is your approach to pricing. Actually, I know it's a strange one but I know that lots of entrepreneurs start, when they first come into the marketplace, and we get asked this lots. I've got my own opinion in the sense of market-led pricing. I think it's better, understanding the value that you're delivering, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's a hard thing, because lots of companies, when they first come into the market, or they're new to the market, or they just built a product, you see a lot of them, they undervalue themselves. They basically go for a low price, which is okay if you want to go for high volume. But the fact is, I think you've got to be careful that then the person purchasing it doesn't value the solution that you're delivering. You then get to this point of, we all do it as consumers. You buy, if somebody gives you something for free, the likelihood of you using it reduces, because ultimately you sort of go, well, it's there, I didn't have to spend anything, so it's not so important to me. Where if you bought something really expensive, you're going to use it one way or another because you value it more. Do you think that's important as far as the education market's concerned? And the reason why I ask this actually is because when we interviewed Rowena from Astria, Matt, ultimately she was very much along the lines of, our budgets are tight. Unless somebody's telling me they're going to save me £35,000 so I can get a teacher, then my ears are slightly closed to it. What's your, what do you think? How do you approach it?
It's interesting. Two things to talk about here, especially the last point about teachers and saving money and stuff. But lots of things to say, really. Number one is that free never worked for me, right? Never worked for me, right? I did try, right, but it never actually worked. We do something interesting here at teamSOS, and the way that we got here is interesting, right? So in terms of our pricing, we went and spoke to schools, and I spoke to people, and I tried to say, how, with people that I trusted, what value do you put on this, right? Because it's hard to actually, you guess, right? You look at some of the, if there's competitive products, it's sort of there, that gives you a place to start. But if there isn't, that's another thing. And then you think, okay, what's like this, right? To make it a flavor, right? But I spoke to people, and I after a while, I got a position where I was quite happy. And it was interesting, right? Because I'm really telling you the gubbins now, right? It was interesting because what I thought we were saying the product, or providing a product, was for teachers, right? So you could actually say, I'll do it by the teacher, right? Actually, no one wants to do that, because everyone totally gets pupils on roll, right, and maybe phases. And so actually, even though it made more sense for me, there's obviously a relationship between the size of the school and the number of students and number of teachers, whatever. But actually, I wanted to do it by teachers, but actually it made more sense because of all of the obvious reasons to do it by students on roll. So yeah. The things that I learned in the past is that there's people who like to do things. It's a combination of commitment as well. Now that's quite an interesting thing. So we do price. We've set a price list which says there's a price for 1 year if you just want it renewable 1 year.
Yeah.
The cheaper price if you want it for 1 year, but you want to commit to it for free, and you just build annually. And then there's actually a cheaper price if you want to commit to it for 3 years and pay for 3 years up front, right? And actually, when someone comes to you, which is they often do in education, say, can I have a discount, please, right? Or you can actually say, well, actually, you can get a discount if you commit for longer, right?
Yeah.
Or if you want to pay up front, you can get a bigger discount. And actually, it stops you having to do a discount, right? Because you've actually got these different levels, right? Which are cut in stone, and you've built it in, you've baked it in, if you like, for that, to cater for that. And we found that works quite well, right?
Cool.
Right. So, but the other thing, which is just goes to your point right at the beginning that I did want to mention, is that the savings, you talk about, investing in products and savings, and people do like, and it's sometimes really hard to justify to your audience, it's not always easy to say you do this and you're going to save £50,000, you're going to save whatever, right? But one of the things that we do have, right, is that when I actually took my product to a London Matt, he actually saw the value, because he felt that it was going to make his staff feel safer, the school cared for them, right? We're talking about staff safeguarding now. The school cared for them much more, right? And as a result of that, he felt that it would help his retention of staff. And he said to me, I've got a quote on our website because I was so proud of it, right? That if this kept one member of staff from leaving for here, it paid for itself.
Yeah.
And because staff turnover in schools is so high, and if you think about how much it costs to replace somebody, teamSOS is cheaper than that for one person. And so people, it's very justifiable.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, because ultimately, it's not just retention. It's actually teachers wanting to come to your school. You say it's a bit of a double bonus, I suppose, in some ways, because you're retaining teachers because they feel safe and they feel like you are looking after them and they're safeguarding them. The second part is, so if I was a teacher and you're you were living in London, so you're going to maybe a inner city school, and I'm not suggesting all inner city schools are bad, but you might sort of then go, well, actually, somebody who cares about my safeguarding, that's the school I want to go to. So you're sort of helping them both ways.
You see, these things contribute to that, right? This button, right, which could go on a lanyard or it goes in your pocket, because what we're doing here, right, for that very argument, right, is saying that you can attract members of staff, because what you're saying to them is, I'll give you this button and it protects you in school. That's a given, right? We've got these systems in school, but you put this in your pocket for when you leave the house at home, right? And if you single click on, or if you double click this button, right, in your pocket, it will send a push notification or send a text message to your loved one saying where you are and the fact that you need help, right? So it's looking after them on their way to school and on their way home. Now, if a school provided that to you as a member of staff, you'd think they care. And these things cost absolutely, very small, nothing, right? Almost nothing, right? And so putting them in the hands of your members of staff and effectively saying to them, we care about you from the moment you leave home to the moment you get back home, right? And everywhere in between, right? That's a good message.
Yeah, that is. And hard to evaluate in the sense of, you can obviously, if you lose a member of staff, that's a lot of money and you're right. But there's more to it than just actually money in that sense. There is that sort of element of safeguarding as well, which is extremely important, obviously, within schools at the moment. Yeah, really good, amazing option, value proposition for sure, which I'm sure you've articulated. Do you know what? I've really enjoyed our discussion. I think it's amazing. Your insights are fantastic, and I always knew that's why I've been pushing that you might come on to the Fireside Chat, because I think lots of the things you said, just to quickly summarize, definitely listen to your customers. They're really important to you. Always focus on pushing your business as well. Really be that sort of quite focused. Especially if you're an entrepreneur, maybe things will go wrong, but it's all about sort of picking yourself up, focusing on the direction you want to go into still, maybe changing that every now and then, but really focus on it and be, there's a word I'm trying to find, which is about tenacious, be really tenacious about it. And I think, as with like teamSOS, you will have to evolve your solution. You will need to, look at your solution and understand if your customers, if there's more or greater needs out there, to make sure that, when they take on your solution, they get the most value, in my view, of the solution itself. And I think, that's exactly what you've done with teamSOS, which I think is amazing. So it leads me to say, a big, massive thank you, and I really appreciate your time, because I know you're a busy person. as you articulate, well, you and Joe are busy people. As you articulate, you are rather focused on the businesses that you run, and I'm sure teamSOS is not any different. So a big thank you for your time, and speak to you soon.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed speaking to you, Nick, and it's fabulous to catch up, and thanks very much.